Paranormal in Pennsylvania may discuss topics such as suicide, murder, and other potentially upsetting things. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Halloween special of Paranormal in Pennsylvania. Today we have a very special guest for you guys, Haley. Haley is a psychic medium that believes in connecting with one's higher self. She actually has her own podcast, Opening the Door Podcast, which features her discussing her journey and interviewing others in the same field. You can catch new episodes of Opening the Door every Wednesday wherever you get podcasts. Welcome, Haley.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, be on the other side of the mic, so to speak. So yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're so excited to have you. We love for our Halloween specials to interview people, get other people's perspective. And we've done a lot of paranormal investigators, but never just a standalone medium. So I'm really excited to, personally and professionally interview you.
Yay! I'm excited too.
Okay, so to start off, I have listened to your podcast, so I know some of the answers to these questions. But for our listeners that haven't, can you tell us a bit about what got you started in mediumship and how you decided to share your gift with the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what I'll say is in kind of a funny way. I think like so many psychic mediums will say that they grew up kind of witchy, right? They felt a little bit outside of the crowd or they felt a little bit different. I think I was pretty normal, I have to say. Like I was a total normie for a long time. I don't think you would have looked at me and been like, "Oh, little witchy medium girl." Probably not. But with growing up, I feel like so the house I grew up in, I mean, there's just so much spirit activity in there. And like, so I have other sisters, and my sisters have also experienced things in that house. But basically, I grew up kind of like seeing ghosts or seeing spirits, right? Either when I was like between that waking and sleeping state, or sometimes when I was just walking down the hall. Like my earliest spirit or like visitation moment was I was walking down the hall. It's kind of like a rancher style house. So the bedrooms is like a long hall. And I was walking past my parents' bedroom. The door was open and I saw somebody sitting at the end of the bed, but I knew my dad was at work and my mom was downstairs. So it was like, well, who could that have been? It was clearly an adult person sitting there. And so I like walked past the door, clocked that. It was kind of like this gray, like grainy visual. And I just like walked backwards and looked in the room and there was just nobody there. And I remember just being like, oh, and then just going on my merry little way as like a whatever 6 or 7 year old. And so it was just basically that for a long time. And there were times where I felt really afraid. Like there was a lot of times when I just felt like at night that I just felt like there was presences in my room and I hated that and I was so scared of it. And the other part of that is, I grew up like a lot of us in America and within kind of a religious community or space. And so that like it was like you never talk to spirits, you never talk to ghosts, don't do that. It's evil, it's the devil, like that type of rhetoric. So I was like, oh, I should like this is scary. I'm gonna be told that this isn't okay. So the reason the podcast is called Opening the Door is because I basically created within my mind's eye a door and I just like slammed it shut. And sometimes I would put like chains across it in my head. Like I would see myself putting chains on it and like locking it and all this stuff. Some stuff would sneak through every now and then. But the reason the podcast is called that is because I finally decided, like, I just had this moment of if I don't figure this out, I'm just going to regret, like, when I'm like 45 and looking back at this time, I feel like I'm going to regret not doing this. So that's how my own journey and the podcast was born. So that's why it's called Opening the Door, because I'm hoping to help people open up their door to their intuitive or their mediumship abilities. And it's been so fun so far. So that was a long roundabout way of telling you how it'll happen for me.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. So, kind of going on the mind's eye, oh, and like opening that door, your style seems to be like you mentioned uplifting and leveraging the higher self and spiritual guides. So, like, how is that different from other styles, and how do you, would practice be the right word, I
Yeah,
guess?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's plenty of parts of like mediumship and intuitive ability that people can explore. And so for me, a lot of the time, like I use my clairvoyance and my clairaudience. Those are like two of my main clairs. So that clair just means clear. So clairvoyance is clear seeing, clairaudience is clear hearing. But I call it you hear within your mind's ear. So I'm not hearing things like with my outside ear. I'm hearing like words or phrases that come in to my mind, my mind's ear, and my mind's eye would be where I see those clairvoyant images. So that's where I was creating the door. So really helping people through opening up to that. I think it's a lot about self-trust is like one of the biggest things when we start working with our intuition and opening up to that. You can do that in a lot of different ways, but I think like one of the easiest ways to start is just to start beginning to listen. And that can be different for a lot of different people. But yeah, and it really is all about finding a style that works for you. You know, some people get really deep into meditation when they first start. And I do think meditation is an important part of this because it just helps us get quiet. And when we're a little bit more quiet, when our mind isn't racing, we can start to hear our intuition talk to us or our guides if we want to like get into that. You know, people have kind of different ideas of what's coming through, right? But yeah, so that's kind of where I started. And I actually just started by listening to podcasts too. I was just like, oh, I just got to find some like free learning. So I started listening to podcasts. And if you're listening to this and you're like, well, where can I start? You can start with opening the door. But I also loved psychic teachers, which was like, they just have the hugest, they've been doing it for like 10 years or something. They've got a huge backlog of stuff. So I always think like passive learning is a great way to start because you can just kind of absorb concepts and then decide what is right for you to move forward. I hope that answered the question. If not, let me
Yeah,
know.
that's really cool. And a bit of a follow on with that. So when you were giving us the story of like, when you were raised, you imagined, visualized shutting the door, putting chains around it. Would you say that like that visualization strategy could be helpful for people that are trying to get started as well? Is this a thing?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the times, like I can lead people through meditations to help with that. Like a lot of the times when I do my workshops, I will lead you through a meditation to help you open your door. And obviously that is a, you're kind of almost creating a like a conduit or a metaphor, whatever, however you want to look at it within your mind. So to me, that was actually me, like I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but that was actually me setting the intention. And I think intention setting is like one of the most important things. And you probably know going into investigations too, I'm setting the intention to connect with these spirits in a respectful way. Like whatever your intention, like you're setting that, probably whether you know it or not. So my door was that intention is like, nope, nothing's coming through here. I'm not seeing anything. I can't be afraid. I don't want this like knowledge or this part of me basically. So I was setting that intention within my mind's eye with my clairvoyance, even though again I didn't really know what that was. So you can do it the other way around as well. So you could lead yourself through a meditation to open your door. And if you want to do that, what I would suggest is like sitting down, getting quiet, putting some nice vibey music on, getting comfortable, and just allowing whatever wants to appear to you door-wise come through. And don't be like, it's going to be a door that's brown and has wood and is covered in flowers. Just let it come through however it wants. And then you can approach it, open it up a little bit, or you can just look at it for a little bit, a little while. You know, that's the journey. So yes, I think guided meditation and intention setting through guided meditation can be super, super helpful. Yes.
So is the door in the opening the door logo your door?
That door, I love it. It's very cottagey. I'm actually having like a little rebrand. I guess well, it'll be after this comes out, but that door is a lot softer, I would say, than the door that I created within my mind. The door I created in my mind was like just giant, heavy, like 6-inch steel. You know, it was like nothing's getting through here. And then in college, I started getting a lot softer with it. I planted like roses around it in my mind's eye and all of this stuff. And again, like every now and then I would be like, I haven't had like a weird ghost encounter. And then I would just go in my mind's eye and open it, you know? So I was using this intention way before I even knew like
Mhm.
what I was doing, you know? So yeah.
That's so interesting to me. And I know that you do, like you mentioned, offer the classes and stuff. And I think that's great because I think a lot of people can be confused and not know where to turn. Are you of the mindset that everybody can access this, or do you think there's kind of a predisposition to ability?
I definitely think that everybody can access their intuitive knowing, like their higher self, their guides, all of this stuff. Mediumship is definitely if you want to do it. I definitely think anybody could be a medium, like Sarah or David, either of you with the practice and the intention and wanting to do it could absolutely do that. And so that's where I think coming through with like, do I want this or not is really important. But yes, I actually really believe and I really think that if we were all just like even slightly more tapped in with our intuition daily, I just think the world would probably be such a different place, you know? So yes, I absolutely believe that everybody can do this work or not even do it as work, but just like tap in and live your life just a little bit more intuitively. I think I feel like it is part of my mission a little bit to be like, yes, you are intuitive. Absolutely, you can do this. So yeah, absolutely.
This is going to be another visualization question. With your doors, in your experience, do people like ever change their doors? It's interesting you added like roses and such, right? But does anyone ever like, these metal doors aren't doing it for me anymore? I'd really like them to be like mahogany. I don't know.
I absolutely think you can, totally, because I mean, even if you wanted to, like once you got more comfortable, I think I more see like I use that door in my mind's eye a lot less now. So something that I've done is now is like I've created a whole room, right? And I use it as like my reading room, like mind palace, you know, like that type of thing. But yes, absolutely. Like the power of change. So, right, I planted the roses around it. I took off the chains, like that type of stuff. And yeah, I could easily change it into like maybe like a beautiful ancient door covered in ivy or something like that. And yeah, I think that also helps change your intention, right? Because I was seeing it as like this cold, like very protective thing. And if you want it to be a little bit more fluid, I mean, I wouldn't suggest like right away making it more of a portal, you know, no door, maybe just a veil or something like that. So yeah, I definitely think you can play with the visualization, you know, in any way you want, because I think our mind is just such a powerful place and a really cool place to be. So.
And something that you brought up there that I was kind of thinking, but I didn't know how to word the question. So, kind of thank you for bringing it up of the recommendation of maybe not at the start having like a portal. So for beginners, you would definitely say, not necessarily a door since we said that so many times, but some way to like a light switch, something where you can have on off.
Yeah, I think that is really helpful in that like I was somebody who from a young age up through like college and beyond was like waking up to spirit activity in the night. And so that's because I was like ungrounded and not setting any intention and like didn't really know how to like control what was going on. So now as like a working psychic medium, I actually have a lot less weird experiences because of that. So yes, we're setting the intention and yes, you can have like an on and off. That light switch is a great example. Even just saying like before you go to bed or maybe before you go out throughout your day is like, I'm not receiving anything right now from this. You know, it can be as easy as that. If you feel like you're not a good visualizer or you have, there's a word for it. I forget what it is, but some people have a lot of trouble visualizing within their mind's eye. You can even just affirm it with your words. I'm not receiving anything today. And then maybe if you want to do a meditation to meet with your higher self or just meditate to meet with your own intuitive self, anything like that, you can say like you're sitting down, you're getting in your meditation. I'm ready to receive from my intuition. So again, setting that intention. Because as you know, we've got the ghosties, we've got the spirits all around, and setting intention again is really important for what you will be receiving. So yeah, it's the biggest thing I like to stress. So
No, that's really helpful and really cool. And also, I love the idea that you're using it now. Your mind's eye has more of a visualization of reading room. And with your podcast, I'm like, why, yes, like the door's unlocked. You may come in and, sit down. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, that's how I do my mediumship reading. So if I have somebody sitting in front of me where, they've come to me, they're looking for a mediumship reading, they're looking to connect with a guide or something, I see myself in that room and it has a door on the far end. So I'm still working with that door imagery. And I find that people's loved ones, like I can get so much about them from the way that they walk through the door. Are they coming through, like, are they throwing the door open? Or are they like, maybe they have a limp as they're walking towards me, you know? So I actually find that it can be a really great tool for mediumship as well, because I get to see how somebody wants to present as they like move into my energetic space, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's really interesting. Do you have a favorite story of a reading? And obviously, I don't want you to divulge anybody's information, but without naming names, do you have a favorite reading or favorite experience that comes to mind?
I have a few that come to mind, but I'll tell you kind of a funny one. And this was in my practice era. So I practiced for like probably about a little over a year before I did anything like paid. So I was practicing with a girl from like a practice group I was in, and it was really early in the morning for me because she was in Australia. So it was like her evening, I think it was like 6 a.m. my time or something like that. So I tapped in and immediately I got through the door this and they didn't come through super clear. They came through as like a really tall, almost like a really tall shadow. I didn't see much detail, and they came through literally larger than life. I mean, like they were so tall and big, and I was like, whoa, I don't just like don't recognize this energy. And I was like, oh, okay. So like I kind of just like asked them to leave. And so I focused on a different energy that came through. And at the end of the reading, she was like, oh, that was so great. So great to hear. I forget who came through for her, maybe her grandmother or something. She was like, I have somebody else who comes through, and they're usually just like so larger than life. Like you'll really know when they come through, like all of this stuff. And I was just like, they came through and I sent them away. So that's
You,
just an example of, yeah, how sometimes, and especially like I was in now, if that happened, I would go through describing what I was seeing, but I wasn't as confident back then. I just think it's a really funny story about how like, yes, they came through exactly how she described, but because I was not familiar with the energy, I was just like, well, can't be that, you know? So yeah, it's just like just a good funny one. But yeah.
has there ever been a opposite side of the coin where something came in that you kind of alluded to? It wasn't bad, the larger than life figure now, especially hindsight. But has there ever been a particularly negative entity that's come through and you're like, ooh, spooky?
Not within readings. I've definitely had plenty of entity experience beyond doing a reading for somebody. When I'm doing a reading for somebody, I am setting that intention so hard. Like David, if I was reading for you, it would be like, I'm setting the intention to connect with David's loved ones for his highest and best good. Like that's what we're doing. So the intention is really, really there. I
Gotcha.
did deal with, if you want to get a little spooky, I did deal with I can't explain it other than he was a really creepy little guy in my house earlier this year. And it was really out of nowhere. So at the time, I was working from home. And here you see me in my back room. And then our room, like me and my husband's bedroom, is just the one right beyond here. And our bathroom's like right at the end of the hall. So I was walking from the bathroom to the kitchen, which is like beyond our bedroom. And in the corner, our bedroom door was open. In the corner of that room, on like my husband's side of the bed, like opposite to the side of the bed, it's just like I just saw out of the corner of my eye very dark energy. It was like a kind of a cloud of energy. And I was like, ooh, that was weird. And so I did the thing where let me just walk past again and see if I like, is there a reason for this? Was there a pile of laundry on there? Was there, like what's the mundane reason for this? And I could not find one. And it just like I had goosebumps. I was like, whoa, something really is not right here. So I went about like cleansing the house. I like to use it like a water spray and just setting the intention, like the light getting this thing out, and it was sticky. It was difficult. And I was near our front door really trying to move it out. And I just got this imagery. This is within my mind's eye, so I'm not seeing this with my eyeballs, of this little like kid. He was dressed like he had like a hat on, like a little Letterman's hat. What are they called? Like little page boy hats. I don't know what
Oh
to
Oh
yeah.
like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
flat
yeah.
hats, you know?
Hmm.
And he had like a weird dirty white shirt on and like his little capri like it was just like a very, but he was very much like, I'm here to bother you. Like, I don't want to go. Like this very strange energy. And I was like, I hate this. I really dislike this. So I tried to clear it as best I could. That night when I was asleep, I woke up just like, ooh, goosebumps. And I think twice it woke my husband up because he felt like there was like something shining a light over his head. And he's very intuitive as well. So that happened. And then right after, he keeps his phone at night right where that energy was. And it turned his phone on. Like a show that he had been watching on Netflix on his phone turned on. And that has never, ever happened. I mean, and it was loud. And so then I was like kind of glaring into the corner, like, you get out of here. And
Yeah.
he was like, what is going on? I need to like you have to just tell me what's happening. Cause I was kind of trying to be like, just go back to bed. And I was like, there's just a creepy little guy in here. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah. And then the next morning, I like went really hard with cleansing and it hasn't really been an issue since. But that was just like a very strange little creepy energy that infiltrated earlier in the year. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I feel like in the work that we do, we almost view, or I guess I almost view these ghosts as pretty static, like they're tied to these places. But from what you're saying, it's kind of like they have more flow. Has that been your experience of, spirits moving kind of in and out of your spaces?
Yeah, like the house I grew up in, there's definitely like those ghosts that tend to hang around there. I do think that when like you're a medium or when you're just intuitively open, sometimes things that just really want to be perceived will kind of find you. Like I had a friend joke in college who was like, I don't think the house is haunted. I just think you are, and like, that's really funny and all. I mean, in a way, I don't consider myself like haunted and tormented, but yeah, I think sometimes when you do have this open energy, and I definitely probably wasn't grounding myself the best at that time and all that stuff. So yeah, I think sometimes when you have that open energy, things can just decide to come and visit. I don't want to make it sound scary, but that is kind of what it seems like sometimes. Yeah.
I was going to ask about the that figure because you said little man you presented like kind of like a child. So do you think it was actually a child or something
Ooh,
that maybe looked like a child that was not a child?
that's a good question. I think intuitively what wants to come out when you ask that question, like when I tap into it, is I don't think that it was a little kid. I don't think it was. I think it was like an energy or entity that was presenting that way because ooh, I'm getting goosebumps. Because it knew that that would freak me out, like yeah. So yeah, that's a
Mm.
great question. I think probably I don't think it was a kid, no.
So from the paranormal side, children ghosts and me don't go very well,
Mhm.
mainly because there's no guarantee that's just a child ghost or a
Mm,
spirit. What if it is something more malevolent, more nefarious that is presenting as child because that you lower your guard to child?
yeah.
So I get a little creeped out sometimes with ghost children.
Oh
It's like,
yeah,
oh,
I
it's so
totally get
cute,
that.
but
Yeah. Yep. I hear that completely. Yeah.
Something that's really interesting to me is that you have often discussed God and the concept of God in readings. And I love how you say that God can mean different things to different people. So, can you expand a bit on how you use this idea of God in your practice?
Yes. So, ooh, great question. So there was a point in time, and as I said, like I went to like a church school growing up. So, it was like there was a lot of that. it never felt like it fully jived with me, like the idea of the like Christian Jesus-y God that we see depicted. But so like there was a brief time in college where I was like, I'm an atheist and I don't think that there's anything ever. But it actually didn't make any sense with what I was experiencing, which was like life beyond this life, right? Like with the visitations and stuff. So I quickly realized like, oh yeah, that just like doesn't make sense with my lived experience. And then the very beginning of this journey, like it was almost like I didn't get it. Like I was like, I don't get it. Like, how do God and these things like psychic mediumship work go together? Like I really went on a journey like conceptualizing that for myself. And what I landed on is like a lot of the time I'll just call it the universe because that's what really jives with me, like the universe. But when I say the universe, it could also mean God for you, you know?
Mhm.
And I feel like I really softened to like I feel like I almost used to roll my eyes a little bit at like when somebody's like, oh, I'm just like praying to God about this, I'd be like, well, blah, blah, blah. But now when I hear somebody say that, I just hear like I almost translate it into my own language, which is like I'm praying to the universe about this because that's what I would say, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of room for that. I know that some psychic and mediums like are Catholic and they do this work and they do it within like a scope of Catholicism or Christianity. For me, I'm like a little bit more like very much non-denominational. But if you want to say God and that's what resonates with you, totally do it. I usually say the universe, or a lot of the time when I say it on the podcast, I'm like God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, right?
Mhm.
In my opinion, and I don't want to like, this is only my opinion. You take it however anybody who's listening, take it however you want. But there's that big, overarching, loving life force energy that is flowing through this whole earth and all of us. And like to me, I call that the universe, but to somebody else, they might call that God, like we're experiencing a little differently. We're embodying or seeing it a little bit differently. But to me, it's all the same. And then we have people putting their own like parameters or judgments on it. So like, oh, God wouldn't like you doing that. But I don't think the universe cares too much, in a good way.
Yes, I love that. I say that all the time. I'm always
Yeah.
like, I don't think the energy that is cares if I have a glass of wine. I mean, not right now, but normally, like
Yes,
stuff like that.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's really cool. It's really interesting how you kind of went through the being raised Christian, kind of stepping away from that, and then kind of finding this newfound, I guess I'll call faith, right? So like that's a really cool journey, and I'm happy for you that you were able to find that. That's really cool,
Yeah.
right? Some people don't ever have that spirituality or that kind of connection. So it's great to hear when people can do that. On a different note, Sarah mentioned that you use oracle cards. Can you start by saying what those are and then how do you use them, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I love oracle cards. So, what I'll start with by saying is my first divination tool. So, if you're wondering like what divination is, it's like, you can think of it as divining. You're divining information from the universe or whatever you decide, set your intention to get information from. So, my first divination tool was tarot. So, if you're not familiar with tarot, you might be, it's not really not super ancient, but it is an older form of divination. It comes with the cards and all the cards, every deck. The artwork might be different, but the major arcana and the minor arcana are all the same. So you've got like the star, the high priestess, all of these things, the five of wands and all these things that are the same. Oracle cards are a form of divination also, but every deck is just absolutely completely different. It doesn't have the same I think tarot has 72 cards. I might be wrong about that, but it doesn't have the same 72 card structure as tarot would. So if I buy an oracle deck, it's just going to be completely different from like the next one I see on the shelf, if that makes sense. So I find oracle to be a really, really easy jumping off point for my intuition because there's there's like endless room for my intuition to play. And I find, and this is nothing against tarot or tarot readers, I think they're amazing. I've had tons of them on my podcast. and I get tarot readings, but I just find that my intuition doesn't flow as well with them. So when I have a deck of cards, oh, I don't have one near me right now, but when I have a deck of cards and I shuffle, set that intention, and like I pull a card, there's a card in a deck that I use a lot, and it's like the listen quietly card, right? So it's got a seashell on it and it says listen quietly. I'm not going to find that card in like any other deck. Am I making sense so far?
Yeah.
Yes, you
Okay,
are.
cool. So I've pulled the card, and just as like a mini oracle tutorial, I would look at it and I just start to allow what wants to come through come through. So that might be my intuition is pointing me more toward the shell this time, but maybe I pulled it last week and it wanted me to listen, or it wanted me to focus on the word listen, you know? So it can almost play with a card in a bunch of different ways. And so maybe I'll see that card and then intuitively I'll hear the word like go to the beach, or you know, I'm just making stuff up right now, but I allow my intuition to just flow off of the card, and then you kind of get a full reading from that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. I do suggest like if anybody's listening and they want to play with a tool that feels like pretty cozy almost, and really helps you like just your intuition as a jumping off point, I totally suggest grabbing an oracle deck and seeing like what comes of that for you, because I think it is a fantastic tool where you don't have to do like too much study. You can pick it up, you can shuffle it, you can see what comes out, and then it's about you understanding your intuition a little bit and seeing what wants to come through. So yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love that it's so unique to, each reading, like you mentioned. And you've mentioned, you go into the reading room and invite loved ones in. You also have these oracle cards that can be leveraged. What would you say a typical, and I use that word very lightly, a typical reading with you looks like?
Yeah, so it really depends on what the person is looking for. So I always like to start, if I'm doing like a Zoom reading with somebody, always like to start by asking if they're looking to connect with any of their loved ones, because I find that sometimes that takes up like, if we're connecting, I want to give them plenty of time to do that with their loved ones. So that's why I always ask first. If it's no, I just kind of tap in and see like what wants to come through for them, right? And a lot of the time I won't use Oracle for those. I like to just use myself as the conduit. It can really vary if they are looking for a loved one. That's when I set that intention and ask anybody who wants to come through that door. As soon as I get somebody coming through, I'll wait a little less than a minute just to see what they want to share with me, and then I'll start describing who's coming through. And it's always important to me that they know, they're like, yes, that is my person, before I give a message to them. Sometimes like way back ancestors will come and it's just really hard to confirm. So I always let them decide if they want to receive a message. Most of the time people say yes, but I always like to give people the choice to say no also. It's like, who is this ancestor? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
And then, so usually with my mini readings, that's when Oracle really comes through. I did have a mediumship reading where, again, this was in my practice phase, but I was like sweating so much and I was just struggling. I was like, I'm having so much trouble bringing this person through. And so I did end up grabbing, oh, my light just went off. It's probably a reason, but I did end up
never
grabbing
know.
my Oracle deck to just try to loosen things up intuitively, and that really did help. So most of the time when it's like my longer readings, I'm just using myself as the conduit, and then my mini readings are where I like really pull out the Oracle and we get into that. So yeah.
Sure.
That's really cool. And then one thing that you said earlier that I thought was really cool and probably very encouraging for people learning or getting into this is that you mentioned that you're not, your mind's energy doesn't really flow well with tarot. So perhaps to people that are starting, if it's not really working with one, kind of like what came to my mind was a musical instrument. Maybe that's not your instrument. Maybe you just need to try a different instrument, because I guess to me an instrument sounds so much better than just a tool, right? Because it's a very
Yes.
beautiful thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If something's not working, like if I had just been like, oh, tarot's really not flowing, I'm just gonna stop. Like I would not be here right now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if it's not resonating, really trust yourself. I think for a while I was like really bummed. I was like, oh, like I'm not gonna read tarot, and how am I gonna relate to everybody else in the spiritual space and stuff? But you know what? It's been totally fine. And I've got great friends who read tarot, and like I know the absolute basics, probably less than the basics, but I do other things. And you can always just use yourself as the conduit too, you know. So
Mhm.
yeah, don't give up. If your first tool, your first divination tool doesn't work out, like just try something else. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. And I love that, the intention is so strong that you set. I'm wondering, do you ever read groups or like families or do sessions with more than one person? Because I think that could be really hard.
Yes, I have. So I've done a few like mother daughter readings. Like that's always how they've just turned out. Some people book and then they bring their daughters, and that is actually I I would have thought that they drained me, but I usually come out of them feeling really energetic. And I do kind of find it fun to like go back and forth, and usually we'll get like if it's mediumship, we'll get somebody coming through. I usually am able to grab a message for everybody. Like it does, like I'm an extrovert, so it almost feels like it does just like give me some extra energy to do that, and I always feel great afterwards. It doesn't happen too often, but yeah, it has happened, and it's pretty fun. So
Another question on a tool. Have you ever used a Ouija board? Is that something that you actively use?
it's not I this okay, so I have like a fear of them. And listen, I think that's because of the way I was raised. I had a teacher that like there was this, I never heard it from this teacher, but there was this thing that they were like, oh, this teacher like messed with a Ouija board when they were younger, and like this like basically something haunted them for a really long time, and it would like go into a crow and like fly at this teacher. Like there was this whole lore around it. So that really informed my first understandings of Ouija boards. And because of that, I just like have never used them. And I think I probably wouldn't, because I'm not sure that how fast I could shed that feeling. And I think when we approach spiritual tools, we need to approach them with confidence, and we need to approach them with like groundedness and without fear. And so for that reason, I probably wouldn't use one, but I do know people who use them for specific spirit communication. I have a friend who's a psychic medium, and she used one with a friend to communicate with a haunted doll that they had. So I do definitely think there's room for them. It doesn't happen within my practice, but I do think like, and again, it's that setting intention. So if you got a bunch of kids in a basement who are like, ooh, I want like something really scary to happen, like you're just calling to the universe, like you're calling to every plane, and that can be a lower plane of vibration, and those are gonna be like, oh, you want to talk to me? I'm gonna tell you something terrible, you know? So again, it's
Mhm.
that intention setting. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you ordered spooky? Okay, now you're gonna get horrifying.
Yeah, exactly. Like you are gonna be scared.
Yeah, I also was raised like never touch a Ouija board. My family's very open to the paranormal and spiritual realm, but never touch a Ouija board. And I agree with you that I can't shake it. I know on your episode, the episode that you'll have on your podcast, we talked about the Grand Midway Hotel that has the biggest Ouija board on the roof. And I was hesitant to go there, but part of why I was willing is there's no planchette for the board, so
Right.
it can't actually be used. So I always like to ask, I feel like in the community there's strong stances. Typically, either people are like, don't touch them, they're great. So it's always interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So with with your knowledge of like how Ouija boards are used, can you still use your mind's eye, and certainly with the intentionality, but can you kind of visualize what you're in communion with? Because in my world, or like to my understanding, that's like you're in the dark of what you're speaking with.
Yeah, I definitely think that you could. I think like again, if you're like a teenager in a basement and have no knowledge of how to do that, maybe not, unless like the spirit is very strong and wants to like really push through an image to you. But like yes, so like if I were to use one and I knew the intention of what I wanted to connect with, I certainly think that I could close my eyes with my hand on the planchette and ask to receive a visual. So yes, I do think they can work together. And like a lot of people, when they feel like they're using them, they might get like bodily feelings too. They might feel like heaviness on their shoulders, or they like a lot of the mediums when they work is like, okay, I'm feeling a heaviness on my left shoulder. This usually means like there's a feminine spirit coming through. So those types of tools, your own body as a tool, could definitely be used as you're using a Ouija board as well. Yes, I do think there's like some crossover for sure that could happen. Yeah.
They do creep me out as well because I'm certainly not trained, so I'm not going to put my hands on the planchette and say like, let's let it rip Beyblade.
Yeah.
No, we won't even have Ouija decorations in our house or anything because I don't want someone to start messing with it or like, no, I'm not open to it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to talk about?
The one thing I really want to, I think, just drive home is that, like we talked about at the beginning, like if you're listening to this, you're like, I'm the least intuitive person in the world. It's just like, first, just shed that idea. Don't think that anymore. Like there's so much we can do with our intuition, even with mediumship if you wanted to, but with your intuition, with psychic abilities, that isn't about like reading for people, like you never have to be a psychic reader. You never have to read tarot for anybody else but yourself if you don't want to, like I think it's so important that, if you want to switch careers and you want to feel more in tune with what your intuition or your higher self really wants for you, that's a fantastic way to use your intuition for yourself. I don't know. I just feel really passionate about the fact that we can use intuition and our psychic senses in our everyday life for our own like happiness and to live our most happiest intuitive life. So, I think the first step is just shedding the idea that you're not intuitive because you definitely are, and just start listening and see what comes through.
And if you're listening to this episode of Pip and that resonates with you, I really, really can't recommend Opening the Door enough because the way that you discuss with, other people, even when you have your solo episodes, I feel like you really break it down in an accessible way where it does focus on staying uplifting. So definitely if you have liked this episode, go check out Opening the Door and, you can even try to connect with Haley. She's on Instagram. Find her there. Where else can the people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Opening the Door Podcast. I am on TikTok, Haley B Psychic, and B is spelled BEA, Haley B Psychic. So if you type it in, it'll be Haley B a Psychic. And then it's funny. My website is openingthedoorpodcast.com. So you can find me there. And then the podcast is on Spotify and Apple. So yeah, take a listen if you wish.
Great. And for our listeners, we'll have that all linked in the description so you can find her even easier. Thank you so much, Haley. This has been such an enlightening discussion. I thank you for your time.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Yeah, thank you both. I'm so excited to be here and share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in for this Halloween episode. Tune in next Thursday to see what history and haunts we discuss next. Stay spooky, my friends.